Alice and I are always looking to be more healthy, and we were just talking about how fasting is one of the best ways to do that, but it's so hard. But the great thing about Prolon is that's not what you're doing. It's not that you're not eating for 5 days. Instead, you're using their science-backed program to convince your body you're fasting.
You guys, this 5-day program really is amazing. It comes beautifully packaged and it does all the thinking for you. Each day is its own box. And by following their program, I know I just feel so much better. And I can't wait to experience Prolong Next Gen and continue to see results. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolong is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's PROLONLIFE.com/prosecutors to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Or did she? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, with my frightful co-host, Alice.
It's so accurate. I'm so frightful. I'm terrified of October because, I don't know, I just feel like you're always trying to scare me in October.
And Alice, it is October, which I know all of you are so excited about. And we are honored this October to be a part of True Crime Week on Stitcher, which I hope you will all be checking out. They are kicking off the spookiest month of the year with the creepiest and crawliest true crime podcast out there.
I love Stitcher. Stitcher was one of the first podcast apps that I put on my phone. Actually, Brett, I think you put Stitcher on my phone for me. And now
I believe I did.
You sure did. And now you can listen to this podcast and other great true crime podcasts like our favorite Murder in Alliance and also Big Mad True Crime and more, all for free on Stitcher. Also, check out their curated homepage to find your next true crime pod obsession.
And if you're like Alice and you don't have Stitcher, you can download it in your app store or go to Stitcher.com, and they will be celebrating Halloween all October.
And find your next creepy, crawly podcast there. I know they all make me scream, no matter how unscary or scary they are. Come join me. I'm still so terrified, Brett.
Yeah, I had to twist Alice's arm to even look into this case because somehow she did not know the story of Lizzie Borden, a story that every child sings about in America.
Well, that's the thing, Brett. You set that up perfectly for me. I have huge gaps in my knowledge from growing up in an immigrant family. So of course I didn't know this story. It's not like my mother would recite this nursery rhyme to me.
This one wasn't in any of the books you read.
Not quite.
Well, that's great, because this is a perfect opportunity to introduce this story to you and to all the immigrant families in this country and to people around the world who do not know the story of Lizzie Borden, one of the most famous murders in American history and one that technically remains unsolved to this very day.
Ah, the very best that America has to offer, Lizzie Borden.
Exactly. Axe murders. It really is the best we got. So I'm really excited about this. I'm excited about October. Happy October, everyone. Halloween will be here before you know it. I hope everyone's thinking about what they're going to dress up as this year. There are people who say that Halloween is for children, and to those people, I say, boo. Please don't turn off the podcast, because if you do, you'll miss out on this story about Lizzie Borden. Well, let's talk about this story for those of you who, like Alice, maybe don't know it as well as some of us do. And we'll start not with Lizzie Borden, but with Andrew Borden. Now, Andrew Borden, he had it all. He was one of the wealthiest men in Fall River, Massachusetts, and he had done it all the good old-fashioned way. He had worked for it. He started off as an undertaker, a job that never lacks for clients, but maybe isn't necessarily the most lucrative profession in the world, but he invested well, and by 1892, his interest in banking and textile mills would have made him a multi-millionaire if he lived today. Andrew had two daughters, Emma and Lizzie. Both were the daughters of his first wife, who had died in the 1860s. Soon thereafter, he had married Abby, and for the past 30 years, she had been the girls' stepmother. But by the 1890s, the relationship had soured between the girls and their stepmother. It didn't help that Andrew was a notorious spendthrift, despite both electricity and indoor plumbing being available to the wealthy of the time, of which Andrew certainly was one. He refused to install either in their house. And to make matters worse, it seemed that where he would not spend money necessarily on the home and on Emma and Lizzie, who still lived with their parents, he was willing to shower wealth and property onto his second wife's family, leading to hostility between the girls and their father and their stepmother. It would all come to a head on August 4th, 1892, when one of the most infamous murders in American history would occur.
Can I just interject really quick? When you speak
Of
about
course,
these like horror stories, you are just like, you light up. This is you, Brett. We should just have a horror podcast.
I would love to do a horror podcast.
There's just like,
I'm totally up for a horror podcast.
Yeah, you need to find a new co-host because I would literally
I was
add
about
nothing.
to say, that's the problem. I don't know that we could have a horror podcast. I think, Alice, we have this perfect marriage of true crime podcasting. But
I know.
if we were to introduce horror into the story, I mean, it might end horrifically, and no one would want that. So I think we got to stick to true crime.
What do you mean? Like you're going to kill me?
No, not necessarily. You never know.
Necessarily?
That's the way these stories start, right?
Jeez. Anyways, okay.
But,
I just had to note that you just come alive. Okay. So let's dive into the timeline. Our story here starts on Christmas Day, 1845. Andrew Borden, who is 23 years old, marries Sarah Morse and moves into a house on 92 2nd Street in Fall River, Massachusetts. July 19th, 1860. Lizzie Andrew Borden is born. Sarah will die less than 3 years later. And on June 6, 1865, Andrew marries 37-year-old Abby Gray, and Lizzie is just 5 years old when this marriage occurs. In 1889, Bridget Sullivan, an Irish immigrant, begins working at the Borden home. Now we're going to fast forward a couple years. On June 24th, 1891, there's a daytime robbery of cash and jewelry at the Borden home. Emma, Lizzie, and Bridget are all home when this robbery occurs. Lizzie, who had earlier been accused of shoplifting by a local merchant, is the family's prime suspect. From this date, the doors to the Borden home, both inside and out, are kept locked.
And I think this is a good time to sort of talk about Lizzie Borden and who she was. This is the late 1800s. As all of you know, opportunities for women were quite limited at that time, and the expectation would be that you would marry, hopefully if you're from a family like the Bordens, you would marry someone of wealth. sort of join your wealth to theirs, and you would move out with your husband, and then you would immediately start having children, right? I mean, that's the expectation for a woman at this time. Interestingly, neither Lizzie nor her sister Emma are married. They are in their 30s. They are still living with their parents. Now, the 30s don't seem that old to me. 30s seem quite young. So if you're in your 30s, you are not old. But at the time, they would have been considered almost like spinsters, right? They're these women who probably aren't going to get married, and their opportunities are very limited. So you can sort of imagine Lizzie is in this, what has to be a difficult emotional place, because she's sort of trapped in some ways in her home. There's really nothing she can do. She doesn't have that many social opportunities. And you have to wonder if this thing that you're seeing here with the shoplifting, the possible robbery of cash and jewelry, is her sort of expressing her rebellion against the confines that have been put on her. And I don't think there's any doubt that Lizzie did this. I think the fact that the family, quote unquote, suspected her, that she did it. She stole the stuff. And it is interesting, just that she has this sort of initial attempt to sort of break free from the bonds that she's under.
Thanks, Brett. I think it's really helpful historical context and to kind of place Lizzie in her frame of mind at this time. Now, we fast forward a year. In June of 1892, Andrew Borden uses a hatchet to kill pigeons in the family barn, and the pigeons roosted in a barn loft that Lizzie maintained for their benefit. That's talk about a awkward dinner conversation.
Yeah, and once again, Lizzie doesn't have a whole lot that's hers in her life, right? But she has these pigeons. Now, people dispute this. If you dive into the Lizzie Borden community, you will find that it is massive and it is passionate. Those are the two things that I will say about it. And the people who are in the Lizzie Borden community, another thing I'll say about them is they're very defensive of Lizzie. I feel like most of them don't think Lizzie had anything to do with the crime we're going to talk about. They're very protective of her. And so a lot of people dispute this story, but it seems like there's trial testimony that relates to this. I feel like this probably happened. And once again, Lizzie doesn't have a whole lot. And here's this one thing she has, and her father is taking it away from her in this really violent way, using this hatchet to basically just slaughter these pigeons that probably were roosting in the barn. They weren't afraid of him because they were used to people. They were used to Lizzie, and he's able to just walk up to them and just kill them. So that's dramatic.
That's probably something that's particularly hurtful to Lizzie, is like these pigeons are doing nothing, right? They're probably not burrowing or chewing on anything and causing harm to the barn. So there's really no reason to get rid of them. But here he is getting rid of her pets. A month later, July 21st, 1892, following a family disagreement, Lizzie and Emma Borden leave Fall River and travel to New Bedford.
And this is kind of a big deal because, as we said, they live with the parents. They're usually there. This disagreement stems from some of these property disputes we were talking about. Andrew is starting to give property away. He's starting to pay off debts. And it really angers Lizzie and Emma because some of this property, a lot of this property is their mother's, and they feel like at some point they're gonna have to care for themselves. They're probably not going to have, they're not going to have a husband to care for them or whatever. And as we said, very limited options at the time. And their father seems to be giving away their inheritance. And so there's some anger there, and they leave, but obviously they don't stay gone for very long because they don't really have the means to do so. And eventually they do come back.
Right. They come back actually soon after. And when they are home on August 2nd, 1892, Abby and Andrew Borden wake up complaining of stomach illness. Now, Abby goes to a doctor, Dr. Bowen, and she suggests to the doctor that she might have been poisoned, but Dr. Bowen is skeptical. Now, something interesting to note that even though Abby and Andrew don't feel well, Lizzie is not sick at all. Now, the next day, August 3rd, 1892, in the morning, 3 witnesses report that Lizzie tries unsuccessfully to buy some poison, specifically prussic acid, from Eli Bentz at D.R. Smith's drugstore. Lizzie stated that she needed the poison to clean seal skin caps, a purpose for which the poison is actually not really good for.
For those of you who don't know, prussic acid is also cyanide, another description for it. So it is highly, highly toxic. It is a poison, and you can use it, I think, to clean certain things. I think you can use it to clean metal, for instance, but you wouldn't use it to clean these caps. So a little unusual, and look, the murder's coming, guys. So, when you think about the things that are happening running up to that murder, you have Lizzie, you have number one, people are sick, sort of inexplicably. Now, look, one thing about Andrew Borden, he is so cheap. He is so cheap that he will not allow the help to throw out food. He wants to eat everything. And so they're often eating food that probably is on the verge of being having gone bad, if not already being bad, being sort of rotten, but they're eating it anyway. And so there is some thought that that's what's making them sick. And Lizzie always refused to eat the food once it got to that point, which, more power to her. I would do the same thing. So it's possible that this sickness is completely unrelated, but when you tie it to Lizzie trying to buy cyanide, then it's like, I don't know. This is sort of an interesting thing. So that brings us to August 3rd, 1892. Now, this is the day before the murders. John Morse arrives for a stay with the Bordens. Now, Morse is Andrew's brother-in-law, so he is the brother of Andrew's first wife, Lizzie's mother. And he is engaged in a livestock business with Andrew. Morse ran the business, and Andrew sort of funded the business. And unfortunately, at that point, it seems as though it was losing money. This led to an argument between the two men that night over how to resolve that issue, but apparently whatever the argument was, it wasn't that bad because Morse stays the night with the family. Lizzie, at this point, visits a neighbor named Alice Russell, and she talks forebodingly about certain household activities. She says she fears poisoning, that her father has enemies, and that she has seen suspicious characters around the family house. I'm afraid, she says, that someone will do something, which, interesting foreshadowing for what is going to happen the very next day. And I don't know, Alice, what you think's going on here. A couple possibilities. Either this is true, and you've had some people who are sick, she's afraid of poisoning, there are weird people around, and that just sort of leads up to what's going to happen. Or Lizzie's trying to already set the scene that it's a dangerous area, it's a dangerous situation, and if something were to happen in the household, well, obviously it's not Lizzie.
Yeah, it's really interesting to kind of already setting the stage, whether it's a foreboding feeling she's had, or she's trying to make it seem like it's not out of the blue. I already told you I was one of the fearful ones. Whatever it may be, this is an interesting to say just because of the proximity to what is to come.
Okay, let's walk through the next day, and the timeline in this case is very important. It's been poured over by people for the last century, and so much of what happens that day and what you think or who you think is responsible is tied into this timeline. So we're going to walk through it pretty meticulously so you have a good idea of what happened that day. So it's August 4th, 1892. We'll start at 7 a.m. when Abby, Andrew, and John Morse have breakfast. Afterwards, Morse and Andrew go to the sitting room while Abby begins her house cleaning routine. So Morse and Andrew, they're still talking about business. They're also talking about some properties. They're talking about their horse business or whatever. Abby, who is the woman of the house, is starting her cleaning. Bridget Sullivan, she's still feeling sick from whatever it is that has affected the family. She's still got it. So she actually goes into the backyard and throws up. Morse is going to leave about 8:45 to visit with his niece. Now, his niece lives about 1.25 miles from the house, so 1.25 miles from the house. And the niece will later confirm that Morse did indeed visit her that morning. Lizzie has a light breakfast about 9 a.m. Emma, her sister, is actually away at the time visiting friends in another town. A few minutes later, after Lizzie's breakfast, Andrew leaves the home, taking with him some letters that Lizzie had asked him to mail. So at around 9:30, Abby goes up the stairs to continue her house cleaning on the second floor. Now, she has told Bridget Sullivan to clean the windows. There's been some speculation that this would have upset Bridget. It was a hot day, and that was hot work, and she's sick. She's already thrown up, but she goes to work. She's cleaning the windows in the house. That's her job. Abby is doing other work. And Bridget hears her tell Lizzie that she's going upstairs to put some pillowcases on some pillows in the room that Morse had used the night before. Now, this is obviously a chore that shouldn't take but a few minutes. Bridget, hearing this, then goes outside and is cleaning windows, the outside of the windows on the bottom floor for the next hour. Sometime during that hour, Abby Borden is killed in the guest room by 19 hatchet blows to the back of her head. Now, eventually, Lizzie is going to be accused of this crime. Prosecutors are going to speculate that Lizzie killed her minutes after she went upstairs to put pillowcases on the pillow. So that was the moment when Lizzie struck. Now, you may wonder, how do we know that Abby was killed then? Well, eventually, when the police find Abby and her husband, Andrew, he was also going to be dead. Abby, the blood is coagulated. It is dry, indicating that Abby has been dead for a while. The husband, Andrew, and Lizzie's father, is actually still bleeding when they find him. So it is such a recent attack on him that the blood is very fresh. And so extrapolating from that, they think that Abby would have been killed much earlier. And as you're going to see, no one sees Abby after this. After Abby goes upstairs to put those pillowcases on that pillow, no one sees her again.
And that makes a lot of sense, right? Anyone who puts pillowcases on a pillow knows that only takes probably a couple of minutes. So it doesn't make sense for her to have changed the pillowcases and then to stay up there for a couple hours. It's unlikely, and I don't think any of the signs show that Abby was killed elsewhere and dragged into the guest bedroom. Likely she was killed where she was found, which is in the guest bedroom. And just by the way, the set of facts around Abby going upstairs is like the perfect case of circumstantial evidence that Lizzie is the one who kills Abby. For those of you, we've had this conversation before about circumstantial versus direct evidence. The timeline, overhearing conversations, and then kind of the perfect window for Lizzie to carry out the murder. It just seems like kind of like what you described, Brett, as the Wheel of Fortune, where you don't see all the letters, but it seems quite clear what the answer is.
Yeah, and interestingly, you've got Bridget, while this is going on, whoever's killing Abby, remember, the older sister is gone. Emma is gone. She's out of the city. She's in a different town. That's going to be confirmed later. We'll come back to John Morse, but he is visiting his niece, and the niece is going to confirm that later. Andrew is gone. He's doing some business. We know he left. He's off mailing some letters and doing some other business. He's not there. The only people who are there that we know of are Lizzie and Bridget and Abby. That's it. Those are the only people we know of. Now, if someone came in, you have a couple problems. We're going to talk about the locked doors in this house. As we said before, after that robbery, whether it was Lizzie or not, they were pretty religious about keeping most of the doors locked. Now, there was a back door that wasn't locked. It was the door that Bridget had gone out of. She's cleaning the windows. But remember, she's outside. And as all this is going on, she's sort of circumnavigating the house. She's going around the bottom of the house, washing windows. And she can see inside the various rooms as she's doing that because she's washing the windows. She sees no one in any of those rooms. She doesn't hear anyone go in through the back. She doesn't see anyone outside. Eventually, she comes inside to wash the other side of the windows, and when she does this, she locks the rear screen door behind her. So now, if this killer is still in the house, they're now locked inside. At some point, she hears someone at the front door. Andrew is home.
Now, at 11 a.m., Andrew Borden returns home carrying a small parcel. He's back from mailing those letters for Lizzie. Bridget Sullivan unlocks the door as it was bolted from the inside, contrary to their usual custom, and lets Andrew into the house as she hears a muted laugh from upstairs, which she believes to be Lizzie. Now, given the position of Abby's body at that time, police believe that anyone upstairs would have seen her lying dead in the bedroom.
And this is another important point. When we get into the trial testimony and what the prosecution said, the prosecution talks a lot about the layout of the home, and they talk about a couple of the interesting things that are going on here. Now, we said that the family was locking the doors. That was their custom. But they didn't bolt it from the inside, because if you bolt it from the inside, someone who's outside and has a key can't get in. So Bridget remembers that when Andrew shows up and he's trying to get in, she can hear him outside fumbling with the lock, and she can hear him sort of muttering under his breath in frustration that he can't get in. And she has to let him in. And this combination of him sort of fumbling with the lock and muttering under his breath, she hears this laughter upstairs that she takes to be Lizzie. Now, interestingly, it's often said that she believes it's Lizzie. Her statement was that it was Lizzie. There's no believes it to be, that it was her, that she was up there. And the stairs went up and took a slight left turn. And then from that left turn, you're looking directly into the bedroom. Abby's body is lying next to the bed. If you looked in that bedroom, you could not miss her body. If it is true that Lizzie is up those stairs, it's hard to imagine she did not see her stepmother. Now, I'll give you a counter to that. Lizzie's room is also upstairs. It's actually connected by a doorway to Abby's room. So Lizzie can actually go into Abby's room through an internal door. But maybe she hears the sound too. This is just sort of the counterfact. She hears the sound downstairs too. She walks out of her room, doesn't even look into that other room because she's so focused on what's going on at the door, and that's how that happens. But this is a big piece of evidence against Lizzie. Two things: that she was upstairs where she should have been able to see the body at the time, and the fact that the door is locked from the inside, which tells you that one possibility there is whoever was committing this crime did not want to be interrupted. They wanted to know if somebody was coming in through that front door. Bridget's washing windows. She's going to be doing that for a while. But if somebody else comes in, they could interrupt the murderer. So you lock the door from the inside so that gives you a little bit of time, if somebody does come in, to do whatever it is you need to do.
Lizzie visits her father briefly in the dining room, telling him that Abby had received a message and left the house. By the way, red flag, Lizzie was upstairs, would have seen something, and clearly Abby had not left the house. Andrew lies down in the sitting room, and Lizzie says she helped him remove his boots and get comfortable. At least the first part is not true, as he was wearing his boots when he was found later on. Bridget goes to rest in her attic room. Andrew Borden is murdered shortly thereafter in the sitting room sofa.
A couple things here that are interesting. Number one, so Bridget, when she goes upstairs to the attic room, she can't see into that room. As most of you know, in these old style homes that had servants, the servants often had a back stairway that they would use to access their quarters. So, she would not be mingling with the family. So she had back quarters, so she goes up to the back stairway, goes upstairs, and lays down to rest. Remember, she's been sick, and she's been working really hard all morning cleaning these windows. So this is not unusual that she would do this. It's convenient because she does it, and that opens up a window, so to speak, for this murder to happen, but it makes sense. That's the first thing. The second thing, this whole Lizzie helping her father remove his boots to get him comfortable, this struck people as strange because by this point, her and her father and her stepmother had a very strained relationship. So when they heard Lizzie tell this story, it didn't really ring true to them that she would do that. It's also unusual that she would say that since he's found with his boots on. And the other thing, and Alice has already put her finger on this, the fact that she says that Abby had received a message and left the house. That no one's ever been able to figure out what that message supposedly was. And that's what Lizzie had told Bridget as well. When Bridget asked where Abby was, she said, oh, she got a message. She left the house. She's gone.
Now, at this time, Lizzie calls for Bridget, saying someone had killed her father. And Lizzie tells a neighbor, Adelaide Churchill, that she had been in the barn looking for irons. Now, irons are like sinkers for an upcoming fishing trip at the time of the murder. So she was not in the house, she said. Now, Lizzie later changes her story to say that she went to the barn for some pears. Bridget would testify that she told her that she was in the backyard and heard her father groan, and when Lizzie came in, she found her father dead. So whatever the real story is, there's at least 3 different stories that Lizzie is telling. Now, Lizzie suggests someone should go look for Abby, at which point Abby is found dead upstairs. Shortly after, at 11:15, police are notified of the murders.
Get this, adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Wondery. Greenlight.com/Wondery.
This is a mini meditation guided by Bombas. Repeat after me. I'm comfy, comfy. I'm cozy, cozy. I have 0 blisters on my toes, blisters. And that's because I wear Bombas, the softest socks, underwear, and t-shirts that give back. 1 purchased equals 1 donated. Now go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
So a couple things about this too. I mean, look, you've got the changing story, and Lizzie's changing story is going to be the first thing that sort of tips off the police to the fact that she might be involved. And one thing to note about that, just that simple fact. So often in these cases, we hear people who want to argue the innocence for one side say, well, the police immediately focused on somebody, they put all their energy on that person, and that's why they were eventually arrested and convicted. The situation in 1892 was completely different. The police were incredibly sexist and did not believe that a woman could do this, either mentally or physically, that they could do this. So it was not in their mind at all that Lizzie was involved, and it took a lot to get them there. But once Lizzie starts telling these changing stories, and once they start looking at some of the things we've already gone over, they begin to wonder if Lizzie might be involved. Now just look at what she said here. So she says she's in the backyard. So she goes out that back door, right? So that back door is unlocked. The front door, though, is still locked. So Andrew comes in, they lock the door behind him. That door is locked. So if Lizzie is out back, unless the murderer has been in the home the whole time, so let's say it's not Lizzie, unless they have been in the home the whole time waiting on Andrew to get back, it's difficult to imagine how they could have come in from that back door without Lizzie seeing them. But here's the other problem. Even if they had been there, how did they get out without Lizzie seeing them, even if she was where she said she was?
All good questions, Brett.
And look, I mean, the timeline's really tight. Even by Lizzie's own statement, she says she hears her father groan. So she would have been in there almost immediately after this murder happened. She literally hears her father groan. She goes in, and he's dead. And the murderer is nowhere to be seen. So you have to believe that's how it went down. And, this murderer, how he got out, or she got out, seems to be sort of a mystery. I believe there was like a cellar door that maybe they could have gone down and got out through, but even that seems far-fetched given how tight the timeline is here. Then you have Lizzie do something that people in the behavioral analysis game will tell you is the kind of thing that a murderer does. She suggests that someone else should go look for Abby. She doesn't want to be the one who finds the body. So she suggests that somebody else should go look for them. And then they do, and lo and behold, they find the body. Now, this could be perfectly innocent, but it is the kind of thing that you'll see people do when they commit a murder and they need the body to go ahead and be found. So we talked about Dr. Bowen earlier. He's the one who the Bordens had complained to about their sort of intestinal issues, the fact that they were sick. At 11:32 a.m., he arrives at the Borden house. So remember, Andrew gets home at about 11. By 11:32, Dr. Bowen is there. Now, this is important timing because it both tells you how tight the murder timeline is for Andrew, and it's important because Morse's niece told the police that he left her house just as Bowen arrived at her home to check on a sick family member. So that means Morse leaves his niece's home. Dr. Bowen is arriving at the niece's home, doing whatever he's doing. Morse is headed back to Andrew's house. Now, we don't know the exact time here, but we know that by 11:32, Bowen is back at Andrew's house, at the Borden home, right? Well, if Dr. Bowen was able to get from the niece's house to the Borden home by 11:32, then Morse would have been able to get there before he arrived, right? I mean, that's sort of the expectation. So Morse would have been there before Bowen shows up. So sometime before Bowen shows up, Morse gets back. And remember, timeline here about when Andrew was killed. So question is, could Morse have gotten back to the Borden home before Andrew died? And if he could, then maybe his alibi is a little less convincing than you think. And while we said it had to happen between 11 a.m. and 11:32, it would have been closer to 11:32 than 11 because Andrew is still bleeding, which is a testament to how recently he had been killed. It doesn't take wounds very long at all to stop bleeding after your heart stops beating, but his blood is still flowing, so you got to think this happened pretty quickly or pretty soon before Dr. Bowen showed up.
You know, Brett, just looking at a lot of the cases, we've read the autopsy reports, we've read the police reports. I can't remember the last case we had where the wounds were still bleeding because the killing was so fresh. I mean, that just tells you how fresh these wounds are.
Yeah, I mean, this had just happened. It just, not a lot of time had passed, and it had to happen. I mean, one thing I'll say for Lizzie, her story kind of makes sense in one way. So, according to her story, she's outside, she hears her father groan, she goes inside, and he's dead. That story basically has to be true if she didn't do it, because that's how quickly the body has to be found for her to then call Bridget, raise the alarm, for Dr. Bowen to get over there and those wounds to still be fresh. I mean, it had to be that fast. So, you know, that's one thing for Lizzie. Her story does fit with the wounds. So at this point, you got tons of policemen who show up. This is the biggest thing that's ever happened in this town. They're coming in and out of the Borden home. This is the kind of thing that if we were talking about a case today, would be a big deal because they'd be destroying all sorts of evidence. Forensics was in such a sort of infantile form at the time that there probably wasn't much evidence for them actually to destroy. But nevertheless, they're in and out of the home. The doctors come in and they actually perform the postmortem on the bodies right there on the dining room table. So, you know,
goodness
gracious,
gracious,
you want to eat dinner there the next day.
Nope. Not going to be a family heirloom.
No. So at this time, Lizzie is interrogated by Deputy Marshal Fleet, who's one of the first investigators on the scene. He says that Lizzie is speaking in a very detached manner, and that when Fleet calls Abby her mother, Lizzie snaps, "She is not my mother. She is my stepmother." Which, once again, weird thing to say after somebody's just been killed. People react differently to death. They didn't have a great relationship. Is this a sign that Lizzie killed her, or is it just a sign that she's not upset she's dead? I think it certainly could be the latter, though at the time, people attached a lot of significance to this statement.
And remember, this isn't like they had a recent relationship. Abby became her stepmother when Lizzie was just 5 years old, and here she is, 32 years old? And so she really has been the only mother she remembers.
No, that's true, and that's a really good point to emphasize because I did not know that. Going into this, I assumed this was sort of your classic tale of young, trophy wife. Trophy wife shows up and gets married, and the sister's really jealous, and it leads to all this. But you're right. I mean, she was her mother for a very long time. She basically raised her, and they had this falling out, and that becomes a big issue, but there was a lot of passion there, one way or the other. Whether it was love or hate or anger, there was a lot of passion there. This was not a new thing. 3 days later, on August 7th, Emma observes Lizzie burning her blue corduroy dress in the kitchen fire. There's been a lot of question about what Lizzie was wearing that day, the day of the murders, and this becomes an issue in trial. It becomes an issue in the inquest that's held. At some point, Lizzie says she was wearing a blue dress, but not this blue dress, and no one can ever really nail down which dress she was wearing. It does seem like it was blue, though. In this blue dress, she's burning in a kitchen fire 3 days after the murder, which seems a little unusual.
And remember, we've talked a lot about how Lizzie's father was a spendthrift. So it's not like, even though they were wealthy in their time, that Lizzie was able to buy all the dresses and jewelry that she wanted. Remember, she really just had the clothes that she had. And so I don't think she was so abundantly in the riches that she could spare dresses left and right.
No, I think that's right. So on August 9th through August 11th, there's an inquest held, which I don't even know if they do inquest anymore. This is something that I think happens a lot in England, and I guess still was happening in Massachusetts at the time. Maybe they still do this in Massachusetts. If they still do inquest in Massachusetts, let me know. Inquest is held. Lizzie testifies at this inquest. She, at the time, has been diagnosed with hysteria, so they've given her a lot of the wonder drug of the day to cure that. So she is completely high on morphine. And a lot of people have said that her testimony at the inquest, which gets her in a lot of trouble, probably was a result of her being under the influence of these drugs. So she's detached, she's not emotional, she can't remember things, she's very fuzzy on things, she sort of like changes her story, she answers weirdly, even when there are opportunities to give information that might be helpful to her, she just doesn't do that. These are all things people point to, but given the fact that she was being medicated fairly heavily, a lot of people feel like, probably not that good to use to really look at her. But at the time, this combined with her changing story and the timeline and her burning the dress and various other things, people decide she did it. So on August 12th, she is arrested and she pleads not guilty. She has, she's come into a lot of money now, so she's able to hire some of the best counsel in the country who are going to come and represent her. The trial becomes a sensation. It's the kind of trial that everyone in the country is reading about. This is, the country has been unified by the telegraph. This is really the first time that you have the wire services running constant updates on a trial like this. And so for the first time, people in San Francisco are reading about what happened the day before in the Lizzie Borden trial. It's front page news in every newspaper. It is a sensation. This trial, we're going to talk about it some more, ends in a way that was surprising to many. Lizzie is found not guilty of the murder. Apparently, when she was found not guilty, the result was many people were cheering. They were very excited. There were people weeping in the streets. Lizzie had become something of a hero to the middle and upper class people in Fall River. And this was very much a class thing. If you look at the sort of historical records on this, the lower class people, the working class people, they all thought she was obviously guilty and didn't understand how she was able to get away with this, whereas the people sort of more of her class supported her. She entered the courthouse every day on the arm of her reverend from her church, which obviously had an impact on the jury, the kind of thing that you still see people do to this day. But whatever the case, despite the fact that she was acquitted and people cheered at the time, it didn't take long for sort of a pall to fall over Lizzie, and she became a social outcast. Didn't stop her and her sister from buying a nice house in the sort of mansion district of Fall River, moving out of that old house they'd had before that did not have all the amenities, and living in a nice house with some nice amenities that finally had running water, had electricity, and all that stuff. By June 1st, 1927, though, Lizzie Borden did die at age 67. Only 8 days later, her sister Emma had died. Unfortunately, they had had a falling out a few years before and had not spoken since. Sort of an interesting side note that we can talk about some. There have been rumors and speculation for a long time that Lizzie may have entered into some sort of relationship with an actress from the time who was very famous, and that Emma deeply disapproved of that relationship, and that's why she moved out. That may be more sensationalism than reality, but whatever the case, the two women did not speak, but they were both buried at the family burial plot in Oak Grove Cemetery in Fall River, and from that point, Lizzie Borden's legend only grew.
Did neither of them ever get married?
No, neither of them ever got married.
It's very unusual for the time, but also so sad because they fell out with each other, so there wasn't even the family connection.
Right. No. I mean, there's a lot of sadness to this story. There really is. I mean, it's become, it's a legend, and it's like so many other things. Like, you can stay at the Lizzie Borden house in Fall River to this day. You get to sit on the very couch where Andrew Borden was found, and there's a picture of his dead body sitting on the table next to you, pictures of the skulls and everything. It's like,
wow.
The Lizzie Borden experience, if you want to do that.
I don't, but thank you. I know you do.
Maybe one day.
Now, let's dive into the story that the prosecution gives at trial. I'm going to read to you the first line of the opening statement. Brett, am I really nerdy for getting giddy about reading an opening statement from the 1890s? This is just kind of an amazing, it's kind of an awesome
really
thread to see, right? This is what we do too. But more than 130 years later.
And look, as Alice is reading this, I read this opening statement. At some point, the opening statement just bogs down and becomes basically unintelligible. I don't know how anybody understood any of it. But when you're listening to these first couple lines, just listen to what the prosecutor is doing, because he does some really good stuff in this opening statement.
The opening statement begins, "Upon the 4th day of August of the last year, an old man and woman, husband and wife, each without a known enemy in the world, in their own home, upon a frequented street in the most populous city in this county, under the light of day and in the midst of its activities, were first one, then after an interval of an hour another, severally killed by unlawful human agency. Today, a woman of good social position, of hitherto unquestioned character, a member of a Christian church and active in its good works, the own daughter of one of the victims, is at the bar of this court, accused by the grand jury of this county of these crimes." That was beautiful, out of a novel.
It is. It is like it. It's like it's out of a novel. I mean,
Just so you know, that was 2 sentences.
Right.
Very
exactly.
long sentences. Now, the prosecution immediately points out that this murder didn't happen at a random farmhouse far from the city. They will go on to describe the location in more detail to set the scene for the jurors.
And I think this is so important because I thought my entire life, I assumed this happened in a farmhouse away from the city. This is where this happened. But it actually happened, and they lay it out for you in the middle of town on this really popular street where people are going to be going to and fro. So, not the kind of place you would expect some murderer just to slip up unseen and unknown and murder someone and get away.
Absolutely. And talk about painting a picture. I think this is just so vivid that I think people who listen to this opening statement are transported to where the murders take place. The prosecution says, "In the first place, I may say that the house occupied by this family was a common type of house in this community and in this state, a house with the end to the street and the front door upon the end. It had, I believe, no L. It was a rectangular house. It was situated upon 2nd Street in Fall River, which is one of the most frequented streets outside of the main business streets in the city, and is within, as probably most of you know, a very short distance of the City Hall. It may fairly be called a thoroughfare, as well for foot passengers as for carriages. It is a street used partly for residences and partly for business purposes. Let me pause there for just a moment. Here, you can tell it's been called a thoroughfare, and if you have any doubt that lots of people are around this house, the prosecution points out that this is not just houses, but it's also for businesses. So during the middle of the day, businesses are open and customers frequent those businesses. So now you're getting kind of an idea of just how well-traveled this area is.
And I think he's really doing a good job without saying it of saying, it's interesting. It's an opening statement. So an opening statement, you're not supposed to make argument. That's for closing argument. That's why we call it closing argument. So opening statement is just supposed to sort of lay out the case, lay out the evidence you're going to show, not make an argument one way or the other. But good lawyers know you need to make an argument. You got to make an argument without making an argument, because if you make an argument explicitly, you're going to get objected, and that's bad. So you don't want that to happen. So you're trying to make the argument without doing so. Here, he's just stating some facts, right? But he's clearly saying, what are the chances, ladies and gentlemen, that in the middle of the day on this super busy street, some random person decided, I'm going to go axe murder 2 people in this house that sits right on the street? Like, what are the chances of that? That's what he's saying. And anybody who's listening to this would know that and would know that's the argument he's making, but it's not an argument that the defense could object to.
And skipping forward just a little bit, the prosecution continues. The house is separated from the sidewalk by a wooden fence, a picket fence with 2 gates. And in the rear of the yard in which is situated a barn, there is a high board fence on the top and bottom of which there was at the time, and is, I believe now, a line of barbed wire. Again, showing how this house is well protected. That if it's difficult to crawl over barbed wire, but also noticeable when you have so many people coming to and fro from the businesses in this thoroughfare.
And once again, just saying, like, look, if somebody came in, they walked in the front door, right? Or they walked through the front yard and around the back. They weren't climbing over the fence, weren't climbing under the fence. Whoever did this was taking a huge chance of being seen if it were an intruder. Obviously, the prosecution thinks Lizzie did this. So what would her motive be? According to the prosecution, and we talked about this, the relationship between Lizzie and her parents had begun to deteriorate about 5 years before the murders. It started with property. Andrew was a wealthy man, and he owned a good amount of it. But at the direction of Abby, he'd begun to parcel it out to her relatives. And at that point, Lizzie stopped calling Abby mother, as had been her custom. And when a relative called her mother, she always corrected them and said something along the lines of, don't call her mother. She is a mean thing, and we hate her. So the layout of the home. Andrew is in the sitting room, sitting on the couch, slumped over. Abby is in the upstairs bedroom. Now, the sitting room is off of the sort of main hallway. So also off that hallway was the stairway that led to an upstairs hallway with 3 doors. So basically, you come to this house, there's a main hallway. If you go off one direction, you end up in the sitting room. There's also a stairway. You go up that stairway, then you're in the upstairs. One door of these 3 doors is a closet. The other door is the guest chamber, and it's in this chamber where Abby is found dead at the top of the stairs, and after a slight left turn, you would be looking directly into this chamber. So basically, it's hard to get down the stairs or up the stairs. It's impossible to get down the stairs or up the stairs without passing this door, which was open. There's another door that leads into another bedroom, which was Lizzie's bedroom. And there's a door between the 2 rooms that was kept locked, but Lizzie had a key, and so did Abby.
Now, we've talked a lot about the locked doors. Let's go into a little more detail. The prosecution spent a good amount of time showing that all the doors in the house were locked the night before and the day of the murders. The purpose of this testimony is to show that no stranger could have entered the house, hid out, kind of lying in wait to murder the two elder Bordens. There's no evidence of forced entry. Thus, it would seem that whoever did this either had access to the house or would have been let in by the inhabitants. Where is the blood? Ordinarily, when you hack someone to death with an axe, and Brett taught you all how to do that in great detail in our Hintar Kaifek episode from last year, you'll have blood on them. But Lizzie did not have any blood on her. So how is that possible? Lizzie was seen between the murders and after them, but in both cases, no one mentioned seeing any blood on her.
What's interesting about this is the first murder, you might say, well, she had some time. She'd locked the door. She would have had some time to change. But the second murder, she didn't have any time because right after Andrew was killed, the alarm was raised by Lizzie. We know that because he was still bleeding. So how did she avoid getting blood on her then?
Good question, Brett. And the prosecution may have an answer. Now, some have pointed to the overcoat under Andrew's head. Andrew took great care of this coat, and it's hard to believe he would have balled it up and put it under his head to sleep on. That's not how he treated this coat. That was, kind of a prized possession. It wasn't just something to be crumpled. It would be hung up, taken with care. And it's also unusual that Andrew would have had it at all. Remember, this is a warm day in August, not exactly the type of day for a wool coat. So could Lizzie have worn the coat to kill him and then put the coat under his head since there was already blood on the coat?
And that would answer a lot of questions about why she didn't have any blood on her. Those of you who've seen I think it's like 1974 Elizabeth Montgomery movie about Lizzie Borden, in that movie they speculated somewhat sensationally that Lizzie committed these murders nude, and that's how she avoided having blood on her clothes, because she was naked when she killed her parents. I think that's probably unlikely. I think this overcoat theory is probably a much better one.
I'm sorry, I have to giggle because another reason that would be unlikely is, I guess that could be a shock and awe for your victims. Like, I'm naked, Dad. Now you're dead. It just seems a little bit strange, especially because if Bridget accidentally saw her naked or someone looking through the windows, the freshly washed windows would be like, why are you naked? And also, if you remember, in the 1890s, she probably wasn't in like athleisure, probably wasn't a t-shirt with no bra. She probably had on like an undercoat or some corset or some, like more clothing that would be more difficult to take off rather than just, taking off a t-shirt.
Are you feeling stuck in your career or lacking employment at the moment? Experiencing symptoms of job dissatisfaction? You might be suffering from a common condition known as career stagnation. But don't worry, there's a solution. Monster.com. Monster.com offers a comprehensive suite of career-boosting tools designed just for you. Our free resume review and AI interview prep tool will help you stand out from the crowd. Need more guidance? Dive into our career advice articles for expert tips and insights. And don't forget to check out our salary tools to ensure you're getting paid what you're worth. Side effects may include a new job, increased confidence, and a brighter future. Consult Monster.com today and take the first step towards your new career. Ready for your next job opportunity? Visit Monster.com now.
Anyways, the overcoat might make sense, and it would make sense why she would put it under her father's head, because there would already be blood on the coat. You would have to explain why there's blood on a coat hanging on a coat rack, but you don't have to explain it if it's underneath a dead body. Bloody clothes and rags were found in a bucket in the basement after the murder. Lizzie told the police that she was menstruating at the time, which definitely freaked out the cops. In fact, it freaked them out so much that they basically were like, stop talking. Sure. Menstruation, women things. And they did not ask any more questions. This almost seems like an SNL skit, Brett. But you can imagine, I mean, women did not typically commit these types of murders of such brute force. And probably even today, if someone came to work and said, I'm menstruating, I can imagine a lot of men and women would just say, like, please stop talking. Just go take care of yourself.
TMI.
TMI indeed. And Lizzie used that to her benefit. She was certainly using all of her assets as a woman to throw police off her scent. Now, even though the police didn't ask any more questions, Bridget did. Now, Bridget did the laundry for the family and would have known if the bloody clothes were menstrual rags. You know, anyone who does laundry or cleans house, you just know the rhythms of your family, especially when it comes to cleaning menstrual rags. But she was unaware of any menstrual rags for Lizzie at this time. That's a big question mark. And then, of course, remember, Emma testified that Lizzie had a dress that she burned just 3 days after the murders. Could it have been that the dress Lizzie was wearing at the time was in fact the dress that she was burning a couple days later, because maybe some blood did get on it? Maybe not so noticeable upon first glance that you would look like you just slaughtered a pig, but enough so that if someone were investigating, they would be able to find droplets of blood. The defense hit this directly, putting Emma on the stand to say that Emma told Lizzie to burn the dress because it was old and stained.
And, you know, the interesting thing about Emma is, if Lizzie did it, did Emma know, or at least suspect? And it's kind of strange, because Emma is the source of this story. I think Emma's the only source. There may have been a neighbor who also saw Lizzie burning this dress. Someone can correct me from the massive Lizzie Borden community, and passionate Lizzie Borden community, who is probably screaming at the radio right now that it was the neighbor, not Emma. But in any event, Emma takes the stand and says this for her sister, which is a big deal, because this was a piece of evidence that was really powerful for the prosecution. And then Emma is saying, no, I said, look, that's just an old rag. There's no reason to keep that. Get rid of it. Go ahead and burn it. If Lizzie burned it, it's because I told her to, not because she was trying to cover anything up. So very interesting event in this trial, and it makes you wonder exactly what was going on with the two sisters. Now, one thing that's interesting about this case, and something we talk about a lot, is overkill. A lot of people, and this is kind of controversial, I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of people who don't really believe in overkill, they think, and they will point to examples of robberies in which someone is stabbed 30 times. But generally speaking, I think it is pretty much accepted that when you see overkill, which is more stab wounds, more hatchet wounds, more hammer wounds, more gunshots, whatever, that are necessary to kill someone, that indicates rage. It indicates a personal attack, not something like a robbery, but someone who is angry. Now, Abby was clearly dead after 2 or 3 blows of this hatchet, possibly only one. We're going to put pictures of these skulls of both of them on the website. These skulls were actually brought out in the trial, and when they were brought out, Lizzie, at the just perfect moment, like in a movie, faints, which had a big impact on the jury, supposedly, because here was Lizzie acting like you would expect the Victorian woman of the late 1800s to act when she sees 2 skulls. She just passes out. But in any event, when you look at them, you can kind of see why she would. I mean, they are just shattered, huge holes in them. Anyone who did that would have known, if they were in control of their faculties, that Abby was dead after the first strike. But they didn't just hit her a couple more times. They struck her a total of 19 times. Her father was also killed, likely with the first strike, a strike that split his eyeball in half and went into his brain. Definitely killed him, but he was struck at least 11 times. Both of these indicate a rage-filled murder and make you think that this is someone who is connected to the family. Now, we've mentioned photographs. There are pictures of Abby's body and pictures of Andrew's body. And the reason for this is one of the first examples of crime scene photography. It was one of the first cases where they were used. And these photographs were this became a famous case, and they became very important. And they're credited with making this a staple practice of any investigation. And obviously now you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of photographs taken of any kind of scene. So we're going to talk about sort of the suspects in the case and who we think did it. We're here 130 years later and we're still debating it. And there is something very interesting about that. The files of Lizzie's defense attorney, George Dexter Robinson, are still locked away in his office in the firm of which he was a part 130 years later. And despite repeated efforts by historians and curious people and true crime podcasters, I am sure, to access those documents, the law firm has refused to this day, citing attorney-client privilege.
What? Really?
Yeah.
So first of all, this law firm still exists, and this is what they put their fight on? This file? They could make so much money by releasing it.
That's what we call principles, Alice. Some people have them.
I guess as we know from Supreme Court case law, the privilege does not die with the client. But still.
Yeah. Attorney-client privilege never dies. It's kind of like we talked
dies.
about this a little bit with the Alberta Jones case and grand jury secrecy. At what point does history and the public's right to know sort of override some of these privileges? All these people have been dead for a very long time, and it certainly would be interesting to read what's in his files. For all we know, if you read his files, it would tell you exactly what happened. So maybe one day they'll decide to release those, but up to this point, they have not. And like Alice said, attorney-client privilege, it never dies. It lives forever. So you can trust your lawyers. Unless they're like Alice and they think they can make a lot of money off of it.
I'm not advising them. I'm just saying, they could make a lot of money, but whatever. Way to go on principle. Way to go on principle. Now, let's turn to the suspects. Emma. We've talked a lot about Emma and how she testified on behalf of the defense. Now, Lizzie's sister Emma was no big fan of Abby either. Both sisters were angry at their stepmother for what they viewed as, Abby's impinging on their future inheritance. But Emma has a rock-solid alibi. She was in a complete other town when the murder occurred, and that was able to be confirmed by others. So, quite physically, she was not able to carry out the murders as she was not in the same town at the time that Abby and Andrew were murdered. There's also an unknown man, though. The historical record in this case records that several people spoke of an unknown man who had been sighted near the house in the days leading up to the murders. Lizzie herself would tell a friend named Russell before the murders that she had seen a man skulking about. Now, Miss Russell said that was merely boys after pigeons. Lizzie said, well, the house has been broken into in broad daylight when Maggie and Emma and I were the only ones in the house. I saw a man the other night as I went home lurking about the buildings, and as I came, he jumped and ran away. Father had trouble with a man the other day about a store. There were angry words, and he turned him out of the house. What? Who's Maggie?
I'm glad you asked that, Alice. Maggie.
Who? Where did that come from?
Bridget, there's something about this, what I'm about to say, that's so amazing that I can't believe it's true. But the family had a housekeeper named Maggie, and Maggie left. So when Bridget started, Bridget was like, my name's Bridget. And they were like, well, we're going to call you Maggie because that's what we called the last housekeeper. And so that's going to be your name. So they called her Maggie as if that were her name for the rest of the time she worked there.
No, they did not.
Yes,
I can't think of anything more dehumanizing. That's
They
so
absolutely
dehumanizing.
did. Yeah.
I bet Bridget was like, sure, call me Maggie. I know all your dark secrets and you are not on your menstrual period.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing to do, but that is what they did.
So in other words, where you can see is this story of a man skulking about seems it could be coming from Lizzie. The reports about this supposed man are often vague and have the feeling of town gossip. This man would have had no reason to kill the Bordens, except for homicidal rage or to steal things. And if he was in a rage, why didn't he kill Lizzie and Bridget, also known as Maggie? And why didn't he steal anything? So that's very bizarre. Bridget was in the house the whole time. So was Lizzie. But yet this supposed unknown man would target 2 random people that he has no history with. That seems very unbelievable. And remember that opening statement. Would it be strange for a man you don't know to be around? No, this is a thoroughfare. This is a place with residences and businesses. This is kind of a hustling and bustling part of town. I don't think it would be strange to see a man that you didn't recognize there.
And I'll just say, in every case, I don't care. If you have a case where somebody's convicted of murder and they claim they're innocent, there will always be stories of strange, shadowy, unknown people around the house in the days leading up to the crime. Always. 100% happens all the time. And now sometimes, maybe there are and maybe they commit it, but it doesn't matter whether they exist or not. There will be stories about them. You remember Henry Kifak? Same thing, right? 2 people who looked like foreigners were in the area. In the Peterson case, you have the burglars who did actually exist, but nevertheless, you have them. In the McDonald case, you have the floppy-haired woman. In Darlie Routier, you have the black car driving around. It's just, it's crazy how you always have this. And I think the reason is simple. Like Alice said, there are always people who are around. And you only notice them. It's kind of like synchronicity where you hear a new word for the first time and then all of a sudden you hear it all the time and you're like, wow, that's so weird that now I'm hearing that song all the time or that word all the time. In reality, you just never noticed before, but now because you're keyed into it, you notice the word. It's the same thing here. Somebody gets brutally murdered and the random car driving down the road or the person who happened to be outside all of a sudden takes on this titanic immense purpose as if that's the guy. And in reality, usually it's not. It's just some random person. And I think in this case, almost certainly this was not a crime committed by a stranger. There's no reason for it to happen. Somehow Lizzie, emerges unscathed and nothing is stolen. There's no sign of anyone breaking in. This was not a random murder. If this happened, it was somebody that they knew, which brings us to William Borden, who may or may not exist. William is supposedly Andrew's illegitimate son. He was supposedly mentally unstable, and there were some who thought that he might have been involved. But the problem is, there's no real evidence that he was at or near the home the day or was involved in any way. It's just sort of another one of those kind of legends that pops up and people talk about. It kind of reminds me, going back to Henry Kifak, of the daughter's husband who was supposedly killed in World War I, and some people think maybe he wasn't killed and he made it back and he murdered everybody. I mean, that's a sexy theory, but probably not true. Then you have Bridget Sullivan. Sullivan, she was unhappy that day. She certainly was there, and she didn't like the fact that she had to clean these windows when she was very clearly sick and it was very hot. But, the fact that she was in such bad shape didn't stop Abby from ordering her to clean the windows. She obviously wasn't treated very well. They wouldn't even call her by her own name. And some have suggested that the cleaning the windows was the last straw, and that's what led her to kill the pair. Look, she was in the house that day. She's somebody who had the opportunity to do this, but it's hard to see how she would do this without Lizzie having seen her.
Another potential suspect is John Morris. We've talked about John a good bit. A popular alternative theory is that Lizzie's uncle, John, killed Andrew and Abby after their fight about business failings. Now, John was a butcher by trade, and he always carried his butcher knife with him. Some have speculated that police were never able to pinpoint the murder weapon because it wasn't a hatchet, it was a butcher knife. Now, the evidence to support this rests primarily on Morse's supposed motive and discrepancies in his alibi. Initially, John said he left his niece's house around noon, but he later revised that to 11:30 and got as early as 11:20. We know that the doctor arrived at the Borden house at 11:32. We also know he had been at Morse's niece's house before that, and that Morse left around the time he arrived. Now, Brett already talked about this, but given that kind of timeline, it's possible that Morse left early enough to get back to the Borden home and murder Andrew before Lizzie found him shortly after 11. Now, Morse testified that upon arriving at the house, he went to the back to grab some pears, a detail that has made some people suspicious. Some people also think that Morse is suspicious because his alibi was so detailed. For instance, he took a trolley back to the house and recalled the badge number of the trolley driver and that there were a number of priests on the car with him. Now, there are a couple problems with this. First, no one saw John Morse enter the house. Not Lizzie, not Bridget. So how did he get inside and murder Andrew and then get out with no one noticing? Remember all those locked doors? But a bigger problem, when did he kill Abby? He was gone at his niece's house when Abby died. And also, what would be his motivation for killing Abby? Now, the theory is that he left the home, came back, got in an argument with Abby, killed her, left, came back, killed Andrew, and left again. All with all these locked doors and Bridget circumnavigating the downstairs and Lizzie being around the house. I mean, frankly, you can tell by the way I'm saying this, I think this is absurd. I just don't think it's possible for him to have killed both Abby and Andrew. Maybe if it were just Andrew, the discrepancies in his timeline and alibi, he may have been able to kill Andrew, but I do not see how he could have also killed Abby. And I don't know why he's gotten so much scrutiny for grabbing pears, but he did just travel, back, and it's lunchtime. It's around 11:30, almost noon, and he's been gone all morning. Maybe he really did go grab some pears, and it was about lunchtime.
Yeah, and a couple things about this. I mean, it seems like most people think John might have done it because he's a weird dude. And he did weird things like, he did know the badge number of the trolley driver on the trolley he took back. And the trolley driver didn't remember him, but he remembered these 6 priests who were on the trolley, which John also talks about. So he's like, it's almost like a joke, right? Like a man walks onto a trolley with 6 priests. So he does have this very detailed alibi, and it's almost too detailed. It's almost, you clearly were establishing that alibi for yourself so that when you got there, nobody would think you did it. But if you believe that, then, it's even worse than he left and he came back and he left and he came back. It's like he left, he came back, he left, he came back, he killed some people, then he jumped on the trolley so that, he would have an alibi. It's just the idea that he could have done all this without anybody seeing him. And so people have sort of just fabricated ideas about how this could happen. One of them is that he was having an affair with Bridget. And so he faked leaving until Andrew was gone, and then he came back to have the affair with Bridget, who, remember, was so sick she was thrown up in the backyard, and she's got to clean the windows, but she's going to, have a tryst with him in the middle of the day. Abby finds him, he kills Abby, and then he has to leave because he needs to establish an alibi, so he goes and establishes an alibi, but he knows that Andrew somehow is going to know that he did it, so he has to kill him, so he comes back and he kills him. The whole thing is kind of crazy. The pear thing, people often say that he showed up and there were all these people in the yard, like 200 people in the yard, and rather than ask what happened, he just goes and gets some pears, which people think strange. With his original timeline, that actually would sound strange because it would be like he was getting back after the murder. But with his new timeline, it almost seems like he almost walked in on the murder. Like if he had gone directly in the house, he would have seen the murder. But instead, he gets there basically right as it's happening, decides to go grab a pear, goes and grabs a pear, and the next thing he knows, the alarm's being raised, Andrew's been killed, and all craziness is breaking loose. So that's what I think actually happened. Now, John is super popular. I mean, he is basically the pro Lizzie Borden defender suspect that he did it. But I need more. If anybody's got more, they want to make that argument, I'm willing to hear it. But I agree with Alice. This whole thing just seems absurd to me. I don't see how John could have been responsible. And that basically leaves us with Lizzie. And Alice, I don't know. What do you think? Did Lizzie Borden take an axe and give her mother 40 whacks and then give her father 41 or what?
Well, of course, Lizzie Borden got away for her crime she did not pay. The story goes, if she finds you, she'd surely give you 42.
That's dark, Alice. So dark.
I finally learned a nursery rhyme. Many years later, decades later, I'm here.
Right. And that last line, most of you don't know, but that is the end of the Lizzie Borden nursery rhyme. And look, hey man, if Mother Goose thinks you did it, then I don't know that I can disagree with the children of the late 1800s. I tend to think Lizzie did this. I think there's a lot of evidence that Lizzie did this. I don't think there's a lot of evidence that anybody else was involved. It seems, frankly, almost impossible that anyone else could have committed this crime. I just don't see how anybody else could get away with it. The only exception and the only caveat I want to make there is that either Lizzie or Abby or John or Bridget knew who did it. They either did it or they knew who did it and didn't care. Like, I could see this as almost being a Lizzie, Abby, Michael Corleone thing from The Godfather. If you guys have seen The Godfather, I don't spoil it, but the movie's been out for 50 years, so there's a point where Michael's the good kid, right? He's the good son. He's the son that the Godfather, Vito Corleone, is hoping will take the family legitimate, right? Like he's going to be a senator or a governor or whatever. And he goes off and he fights in World War II. He's a war hero. He doesn't have anything to do with the business. So everybody trusts him because they know he's not in the business. He's not a gangster. So when his father gets shot, they're trying to figure out how are they going to kill the people who did it and the police commander who is protecting that guy. And they know they're never going to meet with any of their guys because they're going to be suspicious. And Michael says, if you figure out how to get a gun there, I'll do it. I'll kill them both. And everybody laughs at him because they're like, you're not going to do that, right? But he does. He does, and he's able to pull it off because no one would ever suspect him. So you can almost imagine Lizzie and Emma coming together and being like, we have to take care of this. They're going to ruin us. What's going to happen when they get rid of all our property? What's going to become of us? And Emma's like, and Lizzie's like, I'll do it. I'll take care of it. You just go away because it's awfully convenient that Emma's gone. You go away, and when you come back, I'll take care of it, and no one will ever suspect me because I'm Lizzie. I'm this upper middle class woman in 1892. And you know what? They suspected her, but at the end of the day, she was right. She got away with this because no one could believe that she would do this to her parents.
And this probably caused the strain between the sisters. I don't think there's a way that Emma didn't know because clearly she got on the stand and said something that is very likely a lie, right? About why Lizzie burned the dress. And so I don't think there's a way Emma didn't know.
Well, we're very excited to hear what you guys think about this classic American horror/murder story. Perfect for the beginning of October. Alice, I hope you've enjoyed learning more about Lizzie Borden and American history, and I hope all of you have enjoyed this. But if you want to let us know what you think, hit us up at prosecutorspod@gmail.com, at prosecutorspod on Twitter and all your various social media. Thank all of you who are on Patreon who are supporting this, all of you who are watching on YouTube, and anyone who's listening on your various podcasting apps. We love you guys. Thank you so much for supporting us. Thank you so much for leaving all those 5-star reviews. Well, we'll be back next week. We'll have a new case for you, a weird one, a strange one, a case that, I don't know, I don't want to give too much of it away, but it's a disappearance, a very unusual disappearance that will take us north of the border. We're going back to Canada, so we look forward to relating to you a Canadian disappearance story next week. Alice, you got anything else before we move on?
No, but I'm glad we're in October for your sake, Brett.
Me too. Well, thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed this. We will be back next week with a new case, new questions, and new answers. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors. Learn all about Lizzie Borden? Are you familiar with Lizzie Borden now?
No, it scares me. She's creepy.
Well, here we go.
Fair enough.
I'm sorry you're scared. She's very scary. But maybe she didn't do it. There's always that possibility.
Good thing you're doing the nursery rhyme because I really don't know it. You know, I really get nervous right before you say a superlative, because I'm like, what if it's a word I'm supposed to know? And I'm like, I don't know what that word means. I know you do. I know you do. Happy October, Brett.
Happy October, Alice. Okay, here we go.